Okay, let's do this. It's time. It is time, my friends, to talk about, in my opinion, the biggest looming threat, the elephant in the room when it comes to balance in Guild Wars 2. And I am, of course, talking about the way supports apply boons. Take a look at this Mechanist. Everyone loves Mechanist. I love Mechanist. You love Mechanist. The devs love Mechanist. Who doesn't love Mechanist? But there's something here that's very, very interesting. Look at where all of the boons come from on Mechanist. And then I'm going to log over to a Specter and we're going to compare. So all of my boons are coming from profession mechanics. Here we know we've got Aegis, stability, protection, alacrity, we've got might, we've got barrier, all this kind of wonderful stuff on our F skills here. And a lot of our alacrity are key boon. You know, we have alacrity and quickness being very, very important. These are coming from trait interactions, specifically barrier engine and mace auto attacks, synergizing with our mech frame channeling conduits here. So whenever we apply barrier, we give alacrity. This synergizes perfectly with our entire kit, meaning that our alacrity is entirely passive, just pulsing out from the mech, and from auto attacking. In fact, you can just do those two things and that will give you permanent alacrity. You throw in like a little bit of barrier burst and you're overcapped like crazy on these two abilities. Now, let's talk about this. Why is this so good? This is incredibly strong because it frees up my entire skill bar and a lot of my weapons too. It means that all of my other abilities I can use very reactively and responsively. I can use my barrier signet to absorb incoming damage. I can use my elixir gun anytime I like to heal and condition cleanse allies. I can use my med kit to heal my team anytime I want. I can use my shift signet as a teleport, as this utility. And I can use my supply crate whenever I like as well. But what's more important about this is that I can also change my ability bar. If I don't want to run shift signet, great. I can take more CC, for example. And I still want my projectile block with barrier signet. Great. I can take that. If I want to take something else, like maybe a knockback with force signet, that's absolutely fine. If I want to take boon removal, I can do that. I could even drop elixir gun. You know, a very common strategy on Harvest Temple challenge mode is to take elixir S. And we can kind of double up like this, and we now have another ability that we can swap out. We could take Mortar Kit for additional healing very easily. Can take Supply Crate. Now, this level of flexibility is very, very strong, and you might go, well, that doesn't seem too bad. That seems like a very good state to have. And actually, I'd be somewhat inclined to agree with you. There are definitely some problems with Mechanist, but I actually think it's really cool and really good that as a support, or any build actually, you're able to actually adapt your build to the scenario and use your abilities reactively. Reactive gameplay is fun, it's skillful, it's interactive, it's a good time. Awesome. Now let's get to the problem. Let's go ahead and go over to probably, I think this is the biggest offender. There are a few, and we're going to give a few examples here, but let's talk about Spectre. Yeah, let's go ahead and log in. Let's see how Spectre boon application works. So, on Spectre, one thing that we really want to do is apply alacrity on the alacrity support build. So how do we do that? We do that from a trait that says, heal allies in the area when you shadow step. Gain shadow force for each ally in the radius. Wells grant alacrity in their initial impact. So that doesn't seem too bad, but this actually has some very negative consequences for this build. Now, one, we're locked into a minimum number of wells. Typically, this will be 3 wells on a DPS build. You'll see something like this on the skill bar. So we're locked into wells. Immediately, we have limited our flexibility. But worse, we now can't use these abilities reactively. Now, we have to use all of this on cooldown to apply our key boon. So that makes every single one of these skills so much worse because we can't use their actual utility. Essentially, these abilities have been boiled down to press off cooldown for alacrity. And essentially, these 3 skills are doing the work of what very few abilities are doing on, say, a Mechanist or on a Firebrand. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. So we're less flexible, our skills are worse, we can't play reactively, and we're less flexible. Ah, that's quite bad. And you might go ahead and say, well, couldn't you just delay the usage of your Well of Bounty if you want to, say, give the stability? Well, you could do that, but here's the problem. Now you're making a trade-off that another build doesn't need to have. Couldn't you take another well to improve your uptime? Yes. Now we've got punished massively. In other words, we're making a brutal trade-off to actually do this. And you could actually argue that that's the way it should be, and you should make really big trades. You might have to drop uptime to use a skill reactively. You might have to sacrifice a damaging utility to keep up boons. I'm actually okay with that. That's fine. But it's got to be one way or the other. If some builds have this colossal glaring weakness where you have to spam all your skills off cooldown, right, and you can't actually use them for their utility purposes, and others don't, then which ones of those are you going to pick? You're always going to pick the ones that have the flexibility, that have the reactive gameplay, because being reactive is so strong. Like, look, this sounds really weird, because I know that people often kind of rag a little bit on mech for being very passive. Do you know what's fun? One of the best things about mech is how reactive it is. You can use Barrier Signet. You can use your F2 to stun break people out and cleanse Condis. With, give protection. And you don't have to use it on cooldown. You can actually use it responsively to actually break a stun. You can use Barrier Signet for barrier anytime. I think I already said that, but we're repeating ourselves here. We can use Elixir Gun anytime we want. We can use our heal skill anytime we want. Do you know how good Well of Gloom is? Well of Gloom is an amazing... Check this out. This is a 5,000 area of effect heal on Spectre. What an amazing skill. But oh no, we're using it on our Alack rotation. So all of a sudden, instead of being like a tool we could use reactively to resustain our team, it's gone into something that we waste almost all the time because of that. This, again, Well of Bounty, an amazing skill. Stability. Resistance. That's fun. That's cool. But hang on a minute. It's really hard to use this skill reactively because we need to use it on cooldown for Alacrity uptime. Oh no. And we can't replace those skills either. And mech being so reactive, being able to use that mortar kit anytime you want. Use your shift signet anytime you want. Use your med kit anytime you want. Use that. That's what actually is one of the reasons why it's so powerful, because it's so flexible and so dynamic and reactive in how you play it. Of course, it is also, very, very strong. But that's for another conversation, perhaps. And the thing is, you can see this pattern on a lot of other supports. If we go over to Firebrand, you're actually going to see an even more extreme case here. With this. In my opinion, this is arguably more extreme than mech in a lot of ways, because if we go on our Firebrand, you'll notice that all of our quickness uptime, again, it's going to come from just a few abilities. Specifically, we're going to use our heal skill, which turns out is actually amazing and has honestly, this heal skill, that's another video in itself, but we have an amazing heal skill that we use for boons anyway, and now it just gives even more boons because of Liberator's Vow. We have a skill dedicated that doesn't require anything else, that gives quickness baseline, and then we have an elite skill. This gives us free reign to change everything else about our build. We can change a lot of our traits here. We can change 2 of these utility skills to anything we want and use them anytime we want. We can use all of our weapon skills anytime we want. We can use all of our profession mechanics anytime we want and be very responsive with those. And this is the essence of why these builds are so strong and why they continuously dominate. Okay? In the metagame. Is Alack Spectre bad? No, the opposite. It's very, very strong, but it lacks that flexibility. Is Quickness Herald bad? Or Quickness Scrapper bad? Absolutely not. Those are great builds, but they fall over when it comes to that flexibility. They become rigid, a little bit fragile in the way they play, because they don't have this dynamic, reactive nature that these specializations have. This is what's going wrong here with this stuff. This is why Firebrand is so good. I actually want to talk about this a little bit as well, is that you can actually be even more flexible on Firebrand. You can actually even adjust your build further by playing with the traits, because there are kind of more than one ways to do the same thing. And this is another conversation, but Firebrand is actually very specialized, right? And whereas a lot of other elite specs try to cover a lot of ground, there'll be like 1 power, 1 condi, 1 support, right? Whereas Firebrand, almost all of it is some kind of support, some kind of utility. It's very weirdly specialized in some ways. And this means that you can mess around with these skills very easily. And for example, we can take more stability and free up our elite skill for that just by changing a single trait here, taking stalwart speed. Because there's more than one way to accomplish the goal on this build, giving us even more flexibility. And this is definitely another thing that's slightly off topic as well. And this is a big problem in my opinion. Another really big meta issue with this stuff is that some elite specializations do a huge amount of their damage output through utility skills. And this is actually a really, really big problem. Because that means that, again, you have to make this very extreme trade-off. I think the biggest classic example of this would actually be Elementalist is the worst offender here. Ellie gets a lot of damage from its utility skills. On Catalyst, we're using double augments to increase our damage output. If we're, say, playing a conditioned Tempest, we're going to want to have Signet of Fire to burn people, and Signet of Earth, too, potentially, as well. And, or Glyph of the Storms is also another really big one for power and Condi builds. Glyph of Elemental Power is also another really big one here. This is inherently limiting on builds, particularly, funnily enough, kind of offensive support builds. So, a DPS support build, one that gives alacrity or gives quickness and does damage. And being limited in having to use your utility skills off cooldown to either apply boons or do damage is a huge limiting factor because other specs don't have to. And again, just to be clear here, it has to be... ArenaNet basically need to decide on a design philosophy here, right? What's it going to be? Do you either have everything have to make these trade-offs, or do you have nothing to make these trade-offs? Personally, I'm actually a little bit inclined to link key boons into a small amount of skills. A little bit more like Firebrand, a little bit more like Mech, and funnily enough, a bit like Tempest, with the way Lucid Singularity was, although rework it, make it pulse, don't make it at the end, holy shit, it's so painful. Because I think this means that you can actually be super reactive with the way you play. Because all of a sudden now it's super interesting. Every single time we go into a PvE fight, or even, in World vs. World or anywhere, right? We're thinking, oh, hang on. I want to tune my build and pick my utility skills really careful. Instead of saying like, oh, I have to use the same skills in every encounter, otherwise I can't give quickness or alacrity. Oh no, maybe I can delay my skill by 2 seconds and then I can use it, or I have to wait for a long time, and oh, I can only drop 1 skill because I still need 3 of the minimum anyway, right? That just feels a little bit pain, right? Okay, that's a little bit painful to me. I think that having it locked to a few abilities, attached to your weapon skills, attached to a profession mechanic, like we have on Tempest here, is the most fun way to make this work. Because it allows the player to use their utility skills for utility, right? Which is very good. It turns out that's really, really strong. And it's why a lot of these builds, like Mirage, because of course, Mirage, all of your alacrity is on your ambush. So all of your utility skills are free. You can take Portal, you can take Stability, you can take Condi Cleanse, you can take Blink, you can take more CC. Awesome. Love to see it. You can do loads of really, really cool things on that build. The same is true for Firebrand. The same is true for Mechanist. That is what I think we really need to see a few improvements to actually get the meta a bit more fluid and a little bit more fun. Because here's another thing. I'll kind of round out with this. This is kind of my final comment on this issue. I don't think it's that much fun to mash all of your utility skills off cooldown. Hot take. Hot take. Right there. I think it's much more fun to use your abilities in a way to counter a fight, counter a mechanic, to do something, to actually use them to respond to something that's happening in the game. That, to me, is more fun. Don't get me wrong. I love a bit of pumping, a little bit of damage pumping. I'm not saying that we should make everything auto-attack DPS only. That's maybe a little bit ridiculous. But what I do think we should be doing is making it... also, ignore that Tempest build. This build, I don't even know. I was, like, clicking on random traits. While reviewing the patch. Just quick PSA there. But what I think we should be doing is making damage very focused around using a few key profession mechanics and using weapon skills, right? Whereas I think giving boons should be quite similar. They have a few skills that you use to apply boons. And then particularly your utility skills and heal skills, you should use them responsively and reactively. I actually think that that approach makes things a lot easier to balance. I also think it makes things much more interactive. And don't get me wrong, I don't think this necessarily means that things have to be homogenized either. For example, pulsing alacrity from overloads is not the same thing as applying alacrity on barrier. It's not the same thing as, say, a warrior applying quickness by dropping down a banner on someone. Those are different mechanics, right? They're going to have different pros and different cons and different playstyles and different usabilities. All of that can be preserved. You don't have to homogenize everything, in my opinion, to make this work, right? All I'm saying is that there needs to be kind of a rule for how boons work. Because right now, there are some things that just do it better and more efficiently than others. And that is really distorting the way the metagame works. Because again, you know, being flexible is better than not being flexible. It's kind of one of those things that's a bit of a bedrock moment for the game. But yeah, there you go. I think that actually just about covers this. You know, I could talk about a few solutions. For example, a really cool solution, I think, for warrior. You could actually do this on warrior by kind of splitting up the skill into two pieces. Because the other problem here with the lack of flexibility is something that ArenaNet have tried to do. They've tried to fix this a little bit, and I actually think as a little bit of an extra, it's worth pointing out how it's not working. So let's take a look at what they did to banners. You might go, whoa, super speed, stability, quickness, and resistance on Banner of Tactics? What a crazy skill! But the strength of this ability is its own weakness. We put down our spirit, and we put our spirit, our banner, there's a spirit over there, and we go, whoa, 20 seconds of quickness? That's crazy! Whoa! But here's the thing. We've now wasted half of our skill. Our super speed, we just used it randomly. We used our stability totally randomly. And because this skill isn't divided into two, it's kind of a bit hard to use. And not even just hard to use, it's just you can't really get full value out of it, which is very weird. It's doing too much. It's got too much going on. It's trying to cover so many bases that you're not going to be able to actually use it to cover all of the bases. The way I think you can do this is, again, by splitting things up. So abilities having a bit more of a purpose to them, or you can simply add like a secondary component to the skill. For example, something I think could be really cool with Banner of Tactics is just give it a flip skill. So when you drop the banner, it drops the quickness and it starts pulsing out resistance. And then there's a second part of the skill that flips over while the banner is down, that boom, now you activate your stability and super speed. Boom, now you activate your barrier and Aegis. Problem solved. We're responsive, we're reactive, and funny enough, this would actually make it really good, by the way. It would make it super strong, in my opinion. A really fun build to play and would really help out some variants of Quickness Warrior, Quickness DPS Warrior, hell, even Quickness Support Warrior, actually, do a hell of a lot better and be a hell of a lot more playable. Yeah, adding ammo to skills is also something that actually is really worth bringing up here, as we talked about on Firebrand. One of the reasons in particular with Firebrand is ammo, right? Ammo is a very strong mechanic because it allows you to share your ability out. So let's talk about this with something like stability on Mantra of Liberation. Why is it so good to have loads of sources of stability? Because let's imagine that we've got 2 CCs coming over the next 20 seconds, or next 15 seconds. Let's compare using an ability like Stand Your Ground to something like Mantra of Liberation. Or actually, I think it's actually a little bit better to maybe compare Aegis here. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's compare Advance to Shield 4 on Shield of Judgment. So let's imagine we have 2 attacks that we want to block coming in, right? Actually, no. Stability is better. I'm changing my mind. Stability is a better example. There's 2 CCs coming over the next 15 seconds. If we use our Stand Your Ground, we're going to block the first CC, and we'll lose a single stack. But oh no, our stability is going to run out before the second CC comes in. But here's the upside of Mantra of Liberation. We can use this. We now block our first control effect. Oh no, we got hit by a CC. But hang on. Now we've got another charge for the second CC, and we can block both of them. So even though the ability is weaker, we're getting 1 stack compared to 5, the ability to be granular in the usage of that skill in itself is a big advantage. And funny enough, this is true of quickness and boon application as well. So for example here, our prot and resolution in quickness is very granular. Look, it's broken up on this skill, and we've got 3 charges of quickness. So if you miss 1 usage of the quickness mantra, hey, ain't the end of the world, right? But if you miss alacrity on Tempest, if you're not in that radius, you lose 14 seconds of alacrity in one go. That's not good. And this is, again, another big strength. And I actually think it's okay to have some things be more... I'm not saying that everything needs to get ammo. Everything needs to have ammo. But we need to squidge the fairness in application and the efficiency at which you can apply boons and still do other things, because otherwise it's still going to be a problem. Yes, loads of builds have quickness, but not all quickness is the same. Some quickness is better than other quickness, and this, in my opinion, is the biggest elephant in the room, biggest threat to the balance of Guild Wars 2 in PvE, that's kind of hiding in plain sight. And I think ArenaNet really need to look at this and really need to tackle this, because if they don't, then I think that we're going to see the metagame be very difficult to shift. And ultimately, this is the thing, right? The metagame in Guild Wars 2 is very support-driven. It's always going to be, what are you looking for first? You're looking for your heal mech, you're looking for your heal Firebrand, you're looking for your quickness and alacrity. The game is very support-driven. And if the support meta gets stuck, then honestly, the everything else meta is going to get stuck as well, because that is the starting point for the game. I think I've explained that pretty well. Hopefully, I've done a good job of that. Let me know what you think, gamers. Let me know, let me know, let me know. And if you're on YouTube, you know what to do. You know what to do. Pound the like button. Pound the subscribe button. Watch all the other videos. And leave a comment. That's it. I'm out of here.